So picking up where we left off, finally got my son out of here. Granted, this is many hours later. Now he's just fast asleep. So we were last talking about how in the 1880s, in Britain, they opened the Society for Psychical Research, right? So now moving on to the 1900s. So in 1912, Stanford started running studies on thought transference. In the 30s, Duke opened up a parapsychology center trying to study psychic phenomenon, where apparently they took the apparent existence of shared dreaming to be proof that there's some other separate like astral world reality out there, which, of course, that belief is very much strong and still alive today. In the 60s, there was a Welsh mining accident where apparently like caved in and collapsed and killed, 100 plus school children. So this guy, John Barker, put out an ad in the national press looking for any like premonitions about it ahead of time, with which he got 76 people to respond, 38 of which said they saw it in their dreams before it happened. So he takes this information and just runs with it, right? So he suggested there be a central office that systematically collects everyone's dreams and then scours through them for warning signs, which, sounds pretty scary to me. But then again, we got like, these big companies now like Google and Facebook and TikTok or whatever that's collecting all of our data anyway and probably knows more about us than we even, know about ourselves. A few years later, he opens up the Premonition Bureau in London with basically, the goal of trying to collect these dreams and then predict natural disasters and global events. Soon after that, they opened one in New York called the New York Central Premonitions Registry. Also in the 70s, parapsychology labs open at UCLA, Princeton, University of Virginia, and then the CIA, right? Of course, they're in on this. They start to fund secret research to try and weaponize ESP. And then we got a little rebuttal here that they cover in the book. So dreams can help us catch things before they fully come into conscious view, right? Which is true, I would imagine. At least I believe that, right? But precognitive seeming dreams can generally be explained by statistics. As Richard Wiseman puts it, you have a lot of dreams and encounter a lot of waking events. Most of the time, they don't match up, so you forget about them. However, every once in a while, they do, and when this happens, it suddenly becomes easier to remember and recall you had the dream, and then, get convinced that it somehow magically predicted the future. Apparently, after a few years of opening, most of these premonition bureaus have shut down. However, there is something kind of along those lines that is still open. So in 1983, this guy, Arthur Colster, I think that's how you say it, starts the British Parapsychology Department, which is still running today. However, it's under new, management because it's been a long time. So apparently it's under the control of this woman, Caroline Watt. But instead of focusing on like trying to prove that all this stuff is really real, it focuses more on why so many people believe it to be real when, it kind of hasn't been hardcore, obviously proven to be true to the wider audience. Jumping back a little bit more to the 60s, there was another kind of famous study done by this guy, Montague Ullman and Stanley Krippner, who opened labs basically trying to study psychic dreams. So the way they ran this was subject would sleep in a lab while assistants stared at one of 12 images and tried to beam it into their minds. Those who passed that first test would then go on to another, where they would again sleep in a lab and the assistant would focus on a random painting and then try to telepathically transmit the image. When participant would hit REM, they would be awoken, and it supposedly had a 60% hit rate. I have heard this mentioned in other, videos and books and stuff that I've come across. An example of what a successful hit would be here is if the person dreamed of having a meal and then the assistant was looking at, say, an image of the Last Supper, whether that dream had anything to do with Jesus or a painting or something like that, right? They took that to be a hit. So the rebuttal there is people haven't been able to replicate Ullman or Krippner's findings, and apparently this guy Krippner has come out and blamed electrical storms for clogging the psychic airways, which of course to me sounds pretty silly. And then also Susan Blackmore, who if you've been following me for a while, she came up a lot in this book, Explorations in Consciousness, where this was like my first ever kind of like OBE book that I've ever kind of dived into. So Susan Blackmore puts it, it has all the problems with free response research. When people dream, they generate so much content that it's almost inevitable that an image or two resembles the target, right? Which makes sense to me just in how I think of things. But I think a lot of it kind of comes down to, where you're getting your information from and like, what kind of, I guess in this case, books and stuff you're reading. Where I've also recently picked up this book, although I started reading like a couple weeks ago, then I started playing video games a lot again, and now all my free time to read is stuck doing that shit. But this is like an experiment in time, a book written in like the 20s, but it's a kind of newer print of it where it has a preface written by this other dude, Russell Tard. I think that's how you say it. But when I'm reading it, like they present this information in just such a different way that it almost comes off as it being like, it's obviously true that, a bunch of this stuff we're just covering is real. It's been, looked into to some extent for so many years with apparent success. So I just think a lot of it comes down to kind of where you're getting your information. But one of the things that kind of just jumps out to me and why I'm kind of stuck on this more physical reality, materialistic viewpoint so much. So they have this, I guess this magician. So this guy James, Randy. This is like back in like the 2000. I think he put this out where he had like put up $1 million reward to anybody who could come out and really like demonstrate paranormal phenomenon under controlled circumstances. And apparently, no one's ever taken him up on that offer when that money's just sitting there. To my eye, I don't see why no one would take that. If they can really get in there, take it, win the $1 million, then also be, world renowned, be put down in the history books forever as the one to really prove this stuff is legit and real and, can be replicated on command, then by all means, why not do it? Now, I do kind of leave the door open for this stuff being, vaguely possible. I just think if it is, I think it just must be really rare, a really rare circumstance to come by. Plus, it's more fun if you leave that door cracked open. I don't like shutting myself off to things completely because, like I said, man, life is more fun when you leave the possibilities open.